Hello, folks. Well, I cannot exclaim how incredible it is to be back at the Barn Theatre with a full house watching live theatre on this stage. Incredible. And what a performance tonight. What an incredible performance by Alison Reed. And it's a very special night, and we have some special people here this evening. And I just can't wait to see what comes out of this conversation, because you have some of the most interesting minds in literature and theatre on one stage. So I'm not going to waffle on. I'm going to invite onto the stage our leading lady, the full cast of An Elephant in the Garden, Alison Reed. We are in awe. We're in awe of you. Incredible stuff. The adapter and director of An Elephant in the Garden, Simon Reid. Come on. Take a seat. Wherever you like, wherever you like. And you've probably not heard of him, but he's a lovely man. Please be nice to him. He's my good old pal. Not that old, he's not that old. Sir Michael Morpurgo. So originally, I was just off behind that door there, and I said, so folks, I'm going to introduce you all, and then I'm going to just clear off and you guys can have a chat. And Michael refused and said, you're coming on if I'm going on. So I'm stuck here doing the Q&A, which I'm thrilled about. So Michael, give us the story. Where did this come from? What's the inspiration? I know there was an elephant in the garden, but funnily enough, it didn't start in Dresden. Am I right?
No, it didn't. It started during the night. I had a dream. A lot of writers say that. It's usually bollocks, but I had a dream, and I will tell you what the dream was. The dream was that there was this zoo in Belfast, and it was during the Second World War. This was my dream was, and it was during the Second World War, and I knew that from something, I don't know what it was. And there was this woman who was the elephant keeper in Belfast Zoo. It's very specific, one of those dreams you really remember. And at some point, the director of the zoo said to everyone, look, we're going to have to shoot the big animals, the carnivores and the elephants, because we know the Germans are going to bomb Belfast, because they're going to come. We're going to have to do it now, very, very soon. And this woman said, no, you can't. I brought up this elephant myself, a baby, and I brought it up. And the dream was that she persuaded him that she could take the elephant home, keep it in her garden every evening, and bring it back to work the next morning. And I dreamt that dream, definitely, and remembered it as I hadn't remembered. Normally I don't remember dreams that well, but I remembered it in absolute detail. And I woke up in the morning, and there was Claire lying next to me, and she's quite difficult to wake up. And I said, listen to this dream I had. You've got to hear it. And I told her this dream. And she said, no, that was on the radio in the middle of the night. And there really was a woman who had taken an elephant back to the zoo and kept it in her garden. And so what did I do? I went to Mr. Google, and I Googled up Blitz, Belfast, Zoo, elephant. And up came a photograph of this woman with her elephant in this backyard in Belfast. I thought it was just extraordinary. And I love stories like that because I love working off a true story, something that's real and thoroughly unlikely. But then I thought, actually, I've written a lot of stories about war that take place in our islands. which is fair enough. It's where I was born. And it's from where, as a post-war baby, I kind of experienced the story of the war. And then I was thinking, maybe it'd be interesting, because of Dresden, to change it to a German city. I chose Dresden like we all would. We all know about Dresden. So I also looked up Dresden, and what did I find? I found there was a zoo in Dresden. I found that the director of the zoo had said, when the Americans and the British come to bomb, the first thing we have to do is to shoot all the animals. Exactly the same order had gone out. And they failed in that order. And the animals were killed in their cages, and some escaped into the town, and we know what happened to the rest of them. And I thought, let's tell this tale. And I thought it was important because the greatest refugee stream in Europe in my lifetime was the stream from east to west, 10 million Germans on the roads trying to save themselves from the Russians. And that seems to be quite relevant during our times. And so I wrote that story. That's the reason I've whittled on enough.
And Simon, just to take this source material and to turn it into a one-woman show, there must have been some epic challenges when you think of the scale of Michael's work. It's not the only piece that you've adapted of Michael's. If you saw our production of Private Peaceful here last year, Simon also did the adaptation of that, which became probably up there with Warhorse as one of the big adaptations in theatre. This
Predates Warhorse.
I think it's better.
Well, the one I'm saying is the one definitely grew out of the other.
Yeah,
If it had not
yeah.
been a Private Peaceful, there wouldn't have been a Warhorse.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, but you must have had its own challenges in taking this piece. Could you talk through how you'd even approach adapting this sort of work?
Yes, I think, so the first thing, about 18 years ago, I was sitting in the bath, not dreaming, but listening to the radio. And I heard this man, Michael Morpurgo, who I hadn't met actually, but I knew his work. And he was talking about a new novel that was coming out. But it was only, even though I was the father of 4 children, it was, in my view, it was only a kid's novel. I wouldn't listen to this thing, which was what a lot of people at that time might have been quite dismissive about. But then what happened is I just sat up. I mean, don't picture this, me sitting up in the bath, but I sat up in the bath as Michael started to read 10:05. I have the whole night ahead of me. I shan't sleep. I won't dream it away. I've had nearly 18 years of yesterdays and tomorrows, and I was absolutely gripped. And I suddenly realised that actually this was a story that was, although it was told from a young person's point of view, it was a rite of passage story, and it was about the hypocrisy and ridiculousness of adults who screw up the world and go to war and carry on going to war and do, and we've just seen it recently, stupid adults. And we're all adults. And what we try and do, and as I then very rapidly discovered, and what Michael does brilliantly through his work in particular, but a lot of these crossover writers who seem to be writing for young people, but, oh my God, they're writing for adults as well, is they recapture your childlike imagination and that moment where you saw the world clearly, like Lizzie says, like a 16-year-old who can see things for what they were. So that's what drew me initially to Michael's work. And then I did another story about the Spanish Civil War called Toro Toro that he'd written. And I did a couple of other things, the Mozart question.
Yeah, then you went and did a Philip Pullman thing, didn't you?
Yes, then I jumped ship to a kind of
a Shakespeare thing and a Dickens thing. He's not at all faithful.
Yeah, so I've done 7 Michael Morpurgo things rather than more than any other things. But anyway, these children that I had, I have still, Three of them, in fact, at the time, actually, no, we only had three. Three of them were girls, our girls, and they said, why does Michael only write about boys and animals? And I went, oh, really? Yeah, we want to see, we're bored of Private Peaceful. It's been going on for year after year after year. You drag us along to see this thing. It's very, very good, yes, 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 but it's all about a boy's experience. What about, you've got Molly in it, but what about... And I looked through all Michael's work, and I came across this story that I'd actually hadn't read, and I don't think he had told me about, An Elephant in the Garden. I thought, fantastic. It's basically narrated by a woman. It's about the Second World War. It's also told from a different point of view. It's told from the German side, rather. But then in the book, this is the biggest challenge, because in the book, everything, or nearly everything that happens to her brother, to Lizzie's brother, even though Lizzie tells a story. And I went back to my daughters and said, look, we'd be okay, wouldn't it? Lizzie will just tell the story, but it'll all be about her little brother. And they went, no, you can't have the little brother learning how to juggle. She's got to learn how to juggle. You can't have she's got to be the person who is active. And so that suddenly they turned into dramaturgs. And
so do they have a credit?
No, because actually they're slightly dismissive of what I do, because they say, you don't really write plays, you just copy, is what they say. Yeah. So the biggest challenge, sorry, again a long answer, but the biggest challenge was then going to Michael, as I did on Private Peaceful as well, saying, I love the book, can I adapt it? Oh, yes. I'm going to change your framing device and make up something new. And he goes, why? Mine's perfect. Why do you want to do that? Why do you want to do that? And also, I'm going to get rid of the little boy in it as well. But thankfully, every time I've done anything like that with Michael, he does kind of say, well, it may not work, and I hope it does, but I will go with you, and I understand that's in a different medium, and theatre is different from writing a novel, and when we've done the film of Private Peaceful, that was different again, and everything. So basically, the challenges have been to take a great novel and completely reinvent it as a piece of pure theatre, which I then did with Alison in mind. Alison was going to be the director, and there was going to be another actress doing it, and that actress didn't want to do it. And at that point, I went, well, I've kind of written it with Alison's particular range of skills, both vocal and classical and movement-wise, and her training, and also the new work that she's done recently from India, which is where the elephant comes from this experimental theatre company.
So for the audience's perspective and those who don't know, can you explain what the relationship is between you two?
Not too deeply. We don't want to go into this too.
I'm the mother of the 4 children.
So you're married?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was
Partners.
Yeah.
There we go. So before I come on to Alison, you said about the adaptation. And Michael, you watched it tonight. Give us your view on this, not a radical adaptation, but how did you feel watching your story on stage being told in this manner with those slight changes from the book? Do you approve?
Well, I think what I've learned, and I really have learned this now with theatre, is that it's not my story anymore. It's better, actually. The storytelling is really strong, as we all know. We've all sat there and witnessed it. Quite a lot of us will have wept a bit. And it's immensely strong storytelling. And one thing I have learned is that if you're taking a story from the page and you're putting it on the stage or on the screen, that really is down to the people who know stages and know screens. And sometimes you can get lucky. Well, we got lucky. Sometimes things don't go well, and then it's really embarrassing and you want to squirm and walk out. But what we had this evening was a tour de force, apart from anything else, from an extraordinary actor. And a story that I love now. And when I think of it in this guise. That's how strong it's become. So when he was reminding me of the changes, I was thinking, hang on, what the heck are you talking about? You do think that in the end. I think, for instance, of Warhorse. In my head, he's normally a puppet. He's not one of the million horses that went to the First World War and went through what they went through. Of course he is, that's what it's about. But in my head, as I'm thinking of it, it is the theatre production that stays with me and stays with me more than the story. I mean, I'm very connected to theatre emotionally. My mum was an actor and my dad was an actor. They both went to Reade, and I should have been an actor. I mean, I should have been George Clooney, really. Something went wrong.
We can help you there.
Yeah, help from the barn. I could just, of course. No, I mean, the serious thing is, I tell you what I do feel about tonight, actually, is that the courage it takes to stand up there and do what Alison did. I think there must be more than 20 voices that she plays, people that she is. And she's doing that with this extraordinary instinct for storytelling and acting, and every single line is credible. Not for one moment do you have to do anything more than suspend the normal disbelief. It's just extraordinary. And that takes real courage. I mean, the notion of standing out there and then coming on knowing you've got this hour, I don't know how you do it. I really do not know how you do it. So whilst I would want to be George Clooney, I think I'd really... No, the lovely thing is being a writer, you're on your own. You can sit there and you can make mistakes and you can make it as you want to make it. But you're not doing it in front of people and putting yourself on the line. So, I mean, I didn't become an actor seriously because I didn't have the courage to do it. I would have been terrific, there's no question.
And Alison, I don't want to get into even the difficulty of being an actor during the last 18 months, but actually this has had quite a long journey, hasn't it, to get even to this first performance in front of you lovely folks for a live audience. We've had a short history here at the Barn Theatre with this production, but this started a few years back, I believe. So tell us where this performance came from.
So we first performed it in Exeter at the Northcote Theatre and in Bristol. That was I can't remember how many years ago we did it. Seven years ago. And then it's gone on little tours around the UK, and every time I think, oh, that's it, put the elephant back in the cupboard and...
In the garden.
Yeah, and we have all this shoved in our house under beds and things. And then someone said, oh, give it another go, and we'd take it on other little tours. Then I was invited, after we did, because Michael and I do a sort of performed reading of the Mozart Question with a string quartet. And we did that at the Globe Theatre in the little Sam Wanamaker. And then I was invited back to do Elephant there. So I've done it there a couple of times. Then I was invited to Pittsburgh, which was very funny. So it was just me on my own. And we worked out that we could take it as excess luggage. So I had a massive suitcase with everything in it.
What have you got in your an elephant, actually?
I had a trolley and this great... I think we just took one of the big flats. So I had it all boxed up in polystyrene, and I did. I got to Pittsburgh, and they stopped me and said, "What's in there?" And I said, "Oh, it's wooden boxes." And they went, "Furniture." So I had to go and get someone. And anyway, we were let in. So that was an amazing space to be out there doing that. And then we were going to do it here.
We were.
But sadly, lockdown came, and then it was going to be socially distanced. Then it was going to be live streamed, and then
it
eventually
was a pre-recorded. Where we spent a week, I believe.
Yeah, we did
filming it to put out as a stream.
Yeah,
so,
3 days of
talk
filming.
about that, because we didn't have the luxury of you people to give something back.
Yes, it was funny because I thought we'd done. We did a great job, and it was a really good piece of little film that we'd made of it. And I kept thinking, well, I can pretend the audience is there. I just keep talking to them and pretending. But what happened tonight, suddenly getting your reaction, your participation in the story as if you're there with me, took it to a whole different level. And it was amazing. And you suddenly go, yes, this is what I like doing. Even if it's terrifying, and even if, beforehand I was lying on the sofa upstairs going, why do I do this to myself? This is awful. I've got to talk for an hour. No, it was brilliant. But so thank you for your amazing response. And, you know, it changes things. I can't do it the same when you respond. Things come out differently.
But that's
really
the
lovely.
beauty of live theatre. Every
Yeah.
single time, it isn't just about the performers giving their performances, because they are so influenced by an audience. And that synergy between performer and audience, and even better tonight with source material, author and writer, adapter in the room.
But also audience is spurred on by audience.
Yes.
So I mean, I was sitting there, and there was a lady sitting behind me. She probably doesn't know this, but all the way through, she was making very, very slight little noises of sympathy, of horror of what was to come. And it was just like a really, really gentle roll of drums all the way through the story.
Let's get a spotlight on her.
It was wonderful.
Where is she? Hello.
She'll know who she is.
So you're now permanently in the show. You have to come every night.
Can you come every night?
Speak to the team, we'll find you.
It's called intensity, and that's what the audience gave tonight. They gave intensity.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
So
it is a massive shared experience. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it is. There's no way, and we can't recreate that any other way.
You can't. You can't. And Michael, is this your first theatre outing since you've been back on the other side of COVID, or are you slowly getting back into the world?
Well, I did have this minor outing a couple of nights ago at a place called the Albert Hall.
Aha! I didn't hear. I've never
Just,
heard
you
of
know,
it.
I cannot tell you what a come down it was to come to the Barn Theatre with 12 and a half people. No, I mean, the wonderful thing about the Albert Hall was just being there amongst all these lovely people, hearing wonderful music. It was stunning. But it's very difficult to relate to 2,500 people. I mean, I'm not a pop star, nor am I George Clooney, and I was just reading some poetry, and they were playing their music. But it's huge, it's vast, and I spent all my time looking at the ceiling and saying, am I really here? And I think the audience were thinking the same thing. So it was almost too overwhelming. This is actually how theatre should be. Everyone has a piece, if you like, of the actor, of the story, and you're not overwhelmed by the place itself. It's intimate, and that's why it's wonderful coming here. This is intimate theatre. It's great.
Well, we're very grateful to have you here, all of you, and it is incredible now just knowing that as a community, I presume most of us are from Cirencester or in the vicinity, and just thinking only, was it March 2018 when the Barn Theatre relaunched itself as a professional theatre venue, and now we have performances like yours, and Simon's actually working on our next piece, which is David Copperfield, which will be opening.
Oh, Dickens again.
So that's just gone into rehearsals?
It has, and also the good thing about Dickens, he doesn't complain.
He would if he could, but he is not able.
But we're so lucky to have such wonderful creative people come to the Barn Theatre, and I guess this is a moment for me, who usually wandering around, but sometimes sit behind a desk, to the joy of being here with all of you people watching this wonderful work. I feel absolutely humbled and honoured to be a part of it. So let's to the many stories that we will be telling on this stage over the years to come. We're back.
We're back.
So, I'm sure there'll be some wonderful questions from the audience. Can we have a show of hands? Victoria has hand sanitizer. No, not hand sanitizer. Wipes for a microphone. She'll shove the mic in your face, and you can ask this team whatever you'd like within reason. Any takers? Here we go. Right at the front here.
Thanks. One for Sir Michael. Are you able to tell us anything about your current or near future projects?
Yes, I am really, because I've got a book coming out in about a month, And it has the oddest beginning of any book I've ever written. And I can just tell you the odd beginning, but I won't tell you any more than that because otherwise you won't buy the book. The oddest beginning was that 2 years ago, my wife Claire and I, and she will vouch for this, she's here in the audience, and I lie, but she never does, so you can ask her afterwards, but this is true. We were on holiday in a place called Ithaca. There was quite a decent writer there before me called Homer, but his house is a bit of a wreck these days. And we were there, of course, because of the great book, and because of him, and because we wanted a holiday in Greece, that sort of thing. So we're on a beach, and we were on the very same beach that Odysseus walked up on his way back from his 10 years struggle to get home from Troy, after the fall of Troy. He walked up out of the shallows on the very beach that we were staying. So it was full of legend in my head. I wasn't thinking of writing anything at all, and Claire and I used to lie there from time to time for a couple of hours on the beach and just watch. And the thing we loved watching most were the Greek family that came down at about 4 o'clock, all of them together. There was the ancient granny in a long black dress, as usual. There was a mother and a father, I think 2 mothers and fathers and some children, and a Down syndrome girl of about 16 or 17. And we watched, particularly her to start with, about her always choosing exactly the same place to put down her towel. I think she was autistic. She wanted everything to be just the same as it was the day before. She laid it down really, really neatly, set it all up, and then would go swimming in exactly the same place and come back. And one day I was watching her, and then I noticed that the grandmother in the long black dress was walking through the shallows, coming all the way along the beach, up to about her knees in the water, and picking up plastic and putting it in a sack. And I thought, yay, that's really good. And then, I don't know, a couple of days later, having watched her do this a couple of days, she came closer to us and then bent down in the water, and she cupped her hands underneath the water and lifted something up. And she beckoned us over. I didn't know whether she spoke English or whatever, so we went over. And she spoke in halting English, and she said, "Look, look, look, look." It was a flying fish, lying limp in her hands. And she said, "It's dying." And then she said something which was quite extraordinary. She said, "They talk, you know." So I think Claire and I thought, let's get away from this mad woman quickly. And then she said, no, 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 no. And she took her finger and she started stroking the top of the flying fish's head. And this flying fish made a sound rather like this. Ah, ah, ah. And Claire was going, "A fish that talks." And I was thinking the same. And then I was thinking immediately of the Greek god that could change himself into anything he wanted. Proteus, he was called. And I knew I'd been looking at Proteus, who knows everything. And then that same evening, after we'd had our really nice lamb chops and chips and yogurt and honey, we were walking past a town called Vathi, coming along the port, and we came past a house. And it was quite a nice house, and fairly newly built, we thought. And suddenly we saw a man there. It was quite sort of half dark. There was a man, old man, sitting on a sort of rocking chair in the porch. So I said, "Good evening," in my best Greek. And he said, "Hello?" So I said, "You're not Greek." He said, "I am, but I'm also Australian." So I said, "Well, would you mind explaining what you're doing here?" And he said, "Yeah." Then he told me this story. This is just after the same day when I'd seen a fish talk. He said, "When I was 5, there was an earthquake, 1954, and the house fell down. We had no house, and we only had relatives in Melbourne. And like a lot of people from this island, we went to Melbourne. And I swore When I went to Elburn, when I got to about 12, 13, 14, I just wanted one thing. I wanted to go back and rebuild my family house. And I did all right. And I did rebuild it. And this is it. And I come back for 4 months every year. And I sit in the porch. And what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm picking up stories. And I just felt that this connection and contact between Australia, where there are also flying fish, and Ithaca, and ancient Greece, and all the tales of modern Greece, from occupation in the Second World War, from earthquake, from fascist dictatorship, from rescuing refugees today. Do it, Michael. So I wrote this book. It's called When Fishes Flew, and it's totally brilliant.
Any other questions, folks?
And Simon's going to make a play of it.
I was going to say...
He just told me he's going to make a play of it.
Are the theatrical rights available? Questions? Here we go.
For all of you, which were your favorite characters?
Shall I start? Yeah. Well, obviously, I really like Lizzie because I think she's quite a special young woman. But I actually really like the Countess as well because I think she's a very brave woman. And, you know, with what's happening in the world at the moment, you think somebody just stands up and says, I'll take you in. I don't mind who you are, where you're from, what your politics are. I'll just take you in and look after you and make you better. So I think she's a very strong, brave woman. So I think probably in the end I quite like the Countess. But I have to say I really like playing the nasty soldiers as well.
I think, actually, for all the reasons that Alison likes the Countess, I quite like Pappy. Which are the opposite reasons. Because he isn't strong. Because he's terrified when everybody starts having arguments in his house. And because he hasn't got the courage not to sign up and join. And we all hope that if we were ever in that kind of position, we would. But we, deep down, I think we probably know that most of us would be a bit like Pappy, and you would just leave your wife and your child and go off to war because you were told to, and you wouldn't protest. You hoped you would. And I think I find him the most complex of all the characters because I kind of probably identify with him a bit, I think.
For me, it's most definitely Peter, and there's a good reason for that. It's personal, in the sense that I do use quite a lot of my own family history and my own travels and the people I know. They do appear from time to time in the books, and it's not an accident. I don't contrive it. They seem to grow out of a story. And in my case, I was born in 1943, which makes me what's called a war baby, which means I remember nothing about the war at all. But what I do remember is the sense of loss that there was in my house, as the sense of loss was everywhere in so many houses all over the country. But in my house, there was an uncle I had who was called Uncle Peter. And Uncle Peter was in the RAF, in Bomber Command, and he was a navigator. I hope you're picking up on all this. I don't invent much. And he was killed, aged 21, as so many were, buried in Radlett in Hertfordshire because his plane crashed on takeoff from St. Avel in Cornwall, where he was stationed. So I never knew him, but he was a photograph on the mantelpiece at home all the time I was growing up. And there are things you do not forget when you're very small. One thing you really do not forget is if your parents are really upset. And my mother was always very upset on his birthday and on November the 11th and stuff like that. And there was always a poppy there. Anyway, so I grew up in a way with he was very handsome, you know, it runs in the family. And he looked like Rupert Brooke, the poet. He just looked extraordinary. And he had this wonderful hat that they wore in the RAF. And he looked like a hero, which, of course, we all thought after the war, as indeed they were. They They died very, very young, and in this case it was an accident, and so many were as well. Anyway, when I reinvented Peter for this story, I rather treasured that, and I always thought that if he'd lived, and that had happened to him, then if there'd been someone around to look after him, that would have been wonderful. So Peter's my one. And by the way, my daddy went to live in a place called Niagara-on-the-Lake in Canada. And so all these little things sort of creep in. It's not an accident that I use Niagara-on-the-Lake. I don't do anything by accident. It's all got to be true. I'm a man of very little imagination. That's the thing. I think, no, seriously, there are people, great writers, people like Philip Pullman, who can invent whole worlds. And he and others like him, Tolkien and people like this, can do that. I tend to ground myself in the facts of my own life, the facts of history, the facts of what's going on now, and then grow the stories out of those roots. And so Peter has grown out of that.
Great question. Next question, folks. Who else have we got who has a question? Here we go, right down the front. This is what we want.
Why are most of your stories about animals?
You're talking to me? They're not. What do you want about? Tell me stories you know that are about animals of mine. Go on.
Warhorse?
Yes?
The fox one, and there's an elephant one.
And what?
We just saw that
butterfly line.
Butterfly line. Okay, there's two, so go on.
I think there's an elephant one about a tsunami.
Okay. Fine. So you're a bit right. But, well, no, it's a good question. Look, in the end, I tell you what happens, and it's a serious answer to a serious question, I suppose. You finally write about what you care about. Otherwise, there's sort of no point in writing it. So, I care about the same things that I think a lot of people in this room care about, which is the state of the world, which is war and peace, which is the planet, which are refugees, all these things because we care about them, and I'm no different from anyone else. When it comes to animals, I think there is a pretty good reason, and that is that I was lucky enough to spend about 5 years of my young life growing up on the Essex coast, a place called Bradwell, right on the sea. And I used to go out for cycle rides and walks all the way to the sea wall, and I'd walk along the sea wall, and on the way to the sea wall I'd see hares playing in the fields. And when I got to the sea wall, I'd see the seabirds flying in vast, vast numbers. And I loved those walks. There were voyages, really. Each walk was a voyage of discovery. I always wanted pets. And at one point, my mother gave in and got us a dog called Prin. And we loved her. I loved Prin. It was a sort of cross between a setter and a Labrador, and completely mad. And he would run off. And because he ran off, when I was away at school, I went to a boarding school like Hogwarts, only it was true. And I went to this school, and when I came back one holidays, Prin wasn't there. They had given the dog away because he was impossible. And I never really forgave them, because I really loved this dog. And I then found one more pet to have in my life, and that was a goldfish. And I won the goldfish in a village fete. And it was called, I'm very original about names, it was called Swimsy. And I looked after Swimsy really, really well. Only one day I found Swimsy swimming upside down at the top of the bowl. And so I buried Swimsy and made a grave. And that was the last time I ever had a pet. Until much later in life, after I got married, we had dogs a lot. And partly because of that, we made up for it. We had dog after dog after dog, a few cats. But I live on a farm now. And onto this farm, we have children from the cities who come and live and work on the farm with us, or before the pandemic they did. And I have watched and observed, therefore, how children like you relate to animals and how they relate to you. And if you are thinking of the books that I've written about animals, if you think hard about the Butterfly Line and about Warhorse, they're not really about the animals at all. They're about the relationship between people and animals. That's what I'm fascinated by the fact that animals can be very consoling to us. And, I mean, I'll give you a tiny example, then I'll shut up. Warhorse I wrote because of seeing a small boy standing outside the stable. He came from Birmingham, and he was in his dressing gown and his slippers, and he was just standing outside the stable door one night when I went up to read to these kids. He's called Billy, and he's about 10, and Billy didn't speak. He'd had some sort of trauma, and he didn't speak, and the teachers had said to me, Michael, do not ask Billy any questions during the week, because he'll run off back to Birmingham, which is a long way from Devon. We don't want that. So do not ask him questions, because you're always pointing fingers at people and asking him questions. Don't do it. So I didn't, and I watched Billy all week, and Billy didn't talk, and Billy didn't talk. He didn't talk to his friends, he didn't talk to the teachers, and he was brilliant with the animals. He would be the first to put his hand in under the hen laying eggs and get the eggs warm from under the hen. He'd be the first to be brave enough to drive the cows out in the field. So I went up there one November night, and it was dark, and Billy was standing there by the door, and Hebe, our horse, was leaning out of the stable. And Billy was in his dressing gown and slippers, and it was raining, and I was about to say, go indoors, Billy. And then I heard him talking. 19 to the dozen to this horse. And I'm thinking, why is that happening? This is someone who can't talk, doesn't talk, is known not to talk. And to a horse, I think there was this instinctive love, affection, trust, call it what it like, on both sides. That was the point, on both sides. And I went to fetch all the teachers. I said, you've got to come and witness this. Billy does talk. And we all stood in the shadows of the yard and we listened to this. And that's what interests me. It's our relationship with animals rather than the animals themselves. Thank you for your question, which sounded, I thought, quite offensive to start with, and then we made it better.
Incredible. Well, I think that's a perfect time to wrap this up and thank once again this incredible team here who collectively brought us that wonderful performance there. So a huge round of applause and thank you to Alison Reed, Simon Reid and Sir Michael Morpurgo. Thank you very much, folks.
But no